Hey, what's going on, everybody? Back again with another chess video. Today we are going to talk about Alexei Shirov's dive into the modern defense in the early to mid 1990s. So that's why I have a picture of Alexei Shirov with the black pieces next to the black pieces up at the top of the screen there, and on the bottom of the screen you see several players. These are some of the games that we're going to be looking at in quick fashion. Of course, we're not going to take a very long time going over all of the games, but yes, in the first picture to the left is a young Veselin Topalov with hair, of course. Next to him, Michael Adams, and then holding the trophy, Judith Polgar. Then we have above Peter is Peter Lako, and then Spanish Grandmaster Miguel Ilescas, and none other than the great Vichy Anand in another classic photo. So sit back and enjoy. This is not going to be one of those opening videos, winning with the modern or crush your opponents with the modern. Listen, if you want to learn chess, you come to this channel, right? We're not passing off gimmicks here. You're gonna crush everybody with this and that opening. No, if you play chess long enough, you know it doesn't work like that. Again, I always want to remind everybody, chess audiobooks is on leechess.com, chess.com, Instagram, and Twitter. So please follow me on those platforms. Also, please check the links below. Please consider donating and supporting my channel. And there's always DVDs and other further educational materials related to whatever subject that we're speaking about. So we're going to talk about Shirov's foray into the modern defense in the early 90s. Now, what I find interesting is that many times top players will adopt a certain opening, and then there will be a following from the amateur crowd for a bit. And I always find this fascinating. A lot of times, people, will start playing the Berlin Wall, for instance. After they saw Kramnik, nobody was playing the Berlin in the 1990s, right? And then Vladimir Kramnik played the Berlin defense against Kasparov successfully, and now we had a period for about 15 to 20 years where you saw Berlin walls at all the top level tournaments. So it's always interesting to see how top players affect the play of the lesser players, the lesser lights, so to speak. One advantage, or I would say disadvantage now, is that with the engines, right, with the increase in technology, it is very hard to play a novelty and use that novelty or opening innovation for any period of time, just because of the simple fact that the games are broadcast on the internet. Everyone can see and analyze a game immediately with supercomputers, and so many novelties are just like one-offs. So many grandmasters have to, in order to get a win, they have to do this super deep preparation, or they have to resort to surprise methods, surprise openings such as Budapest Gambit or something like that, or Albin Counter Gambit, a rarely played system, or sometimes just play a system that is relatively drawish and then hope to outplay your opponent later on, as Magnus Carlsen has done many times using such openings like the Trompovsky and the Kohler system, for example. Now, there's a great advantage back in the 1800s and 1700s because a player could break out a novelty and use that novelty repetitively, probably for years, before it got to the rest of the around to the rest of the world. Even in the 1950s and 60s, players were able to use opening ideas for several months before it made it into magazines or players would catch on to it. But now it's just practically impossible to do that. So this is why I made this video, because I found it interesting that in the Linares tournament in 1994, classical chess tournament, Alexei Shirov started playing the modern, and he played it for about 2 years at top level. And you'll see the reason why it's so hard to maintain these type of obscure openings at top level. At first, Shirov does very well with the opening because it has the surprise element to it. And then you can see as the grandmasters begin to expect and prepare, then you'll see that there was a shift. So stick around for this brief journey. Again, we're not going to go into deep analysis, but I just want to give you an insight on this particular time in history in chess, and also into some of Alexei Shirov's chess games using the modern defense. So the first game we're going to look at is from 1994 with the white pieces is Veselin Topalov, who was 2640 at the time. Of course, Shirov had black. He was around 2700. And this is from the Linares tournament in Spain. This is round 5. Game started out e4 and g6. This is the modern defense. It's very flexible, all right? But it takes a great amount of skill to be able to handle this opening as black. You can lose very, very quickly because you are giving white basically a free hand in the center, and he can develop his pieces in the most optimal manner, as you're not really resisting him at all. d4, bishop g7, knight c3, and now c6. Another idea in the modern, of course, is d6. But the idea behind c6 is often to get in a quick d5. All right. Another idea behind c6 is also to delay d5 and play the move d6. All right. And then attack on the queen side with b5 and a5. So expand over there. So c6 is very flexible. Of course, the downside of c6 is quite obvious, as the knight on b8 is denied its most natural square. Of course, another demerit, and this can be applied to any of these modern type systems that don't take space in the center, is that the position can become cramped, which of course has the seeds of defeat in them. Game continued, knight f3, and here Shirov opted for the immediate attack on the center in d5. Topalov plays h3. I've highlighted those squares in yellow, f5 and g4, to show you that the reason for h3 is that it makes it hard for the bishop on c8 to develop to g4, of course, which will put pressure on the d4 pawn. And of course, with the pawn on e4, the bishop cannot develop to f5. All right, so if black really wants the bishop to get developed to f5, then he must relinquish his center in d5. So this is good for white. And so now you're going to have this situation where there's this tension in the center. Of course, black wants white to relinquish that tension, whether he puts his e5 or whether he captures on d5. And white would love black to play d takes e4. All right, and give up his center. So game continued, knight h6, bishop f4, and now f6, bishop e2, knight f7, and bishop h2. All right, black has ideas sometime looming with moves like e5 here, for example. So let's give black another move, and he could play moves like e5, getting a quick strike in the center. All right, and let's say d takes, f takes, bishop h2, and bishop e6. Right, it's not too bad. Equal position. Or bishop e3, bishop e6, castle, castle. All right. So Topalov just plays bishop h2, castles, castles, h6, right? I'm sorry, not h6, b6, because after all, where you're gonna develop the c8 bishop. So rook e8, rook e1, I'm sorry, bishop b7, bishop f1, knight d7, and now a4, a6. All right, in order to meet a5 with b5, of course, this has the effect of killing this bishop for all intents and purposes. All right, e takes d5, c takes d5. So that bishop again is not in a good place right now. Actually, it would like to be on f5 right now if it could. Rook to e6, good move by Topalov. And now rook c8 is played here. All right. Other ideas for black: a knight b8 with the idea of rerouting this knight to c6. All right. And rook e8, of course, is another idea with plan of bringing the knight to f8, attacking the rook, making the rook leave. Rook b6, queen c8. In the game, just rook c8 was played by Shirov, and then Topalov played knight takes b5 here, sacrificing the knight for 2 pawns. Now, this is a side effect that you'll see many times when you play these type of defenses. When you you play like this crouched, cramped position, is sometimes you will provoke aggressive players into premature sacrifices. I'm not saying this is a bad sacrifice, but sometimes you will provoke players into unsound sacrifices. They just can't sit on. They just can't sit on their hands. They just have to make some kind of progress in the position. So here, Topalov plays knight takes b5, a takes b5, bishop takes b5, and it looks good, right? He has 2 outside pass pawns. All right, and he already is has a6 on the table. f5, queen e2, a6, rook takes e7, rook takes c2, queen takes c2, pair of rooks comes off the board, and Topalov has what he wants. Knight e4, and we have this race. And again, I'm going fast. I just wanted to give you an introduction to some of the ideas in the modern, but again, like I said, I'm not really trying to analyze too much. Some pieces come off the board, and Shirov is counterattacking, as you can see. He can't just let those pawns just race up the board on the queen side. Notice, however, speaking of the queen side, look where white's pieces are. Only piece really there to protect the king is the bishop on f1. f3, queen f2, king h2, knight g5. Again, look at the black pieces around the white king. This is bad. Knight e1, queen h4 check, king g1, and knight h3 check. Again, we're not going to go into the why this wins. You can analyze that your own, but so this set it off for black in this modern defense, right? Alexei Shirov breaks it out in Linares round 5, important tournament, and he wins against a top player, Vasyl Topalov, in spectacular fashion. So of course he is going to bring the opening out once again. All right, so Topalov goes down in flames after making the sacrifice on the queen side and falls victim to one of Shirov's great attacks. And now 2 rounds later, Alexei Shirov again with the black pieces. This is round 7, and you have another aggressive attacking player, Judith Polgar, who's 26-30 at the time. She began again also with e4, g6, d4, bishop g7, knight c3, again c6, knight f3, and instead of d5 this time, as was played against Topalov, Shirov opts for d6. All right, and many times you will see queenside expansion with b5, a5, etc. But again, this opening is so flexible that sometimes black will also play for the move e5. All right, so very flexible. That's the main staple of this opening. Bishop g5, of course, making e5 not very good at this moment because the queen would be taken. So queen b6, just exploiting the fact that the bishop is missing from the protection of b2. Rook b1 and bishop g4. All right, so you remember in the last game, Shirov had trouble getting that bishop out. All right, because Topalov had played h3, and the bishop wasn't able to come out. But this time, Polgar is playing a more piece-oriented game, and so doesn't play any pawn moves except d4 and e4. So therefore, Shirov is able to get his bishop out to g4, pin the knight, and now threaten to win the pawn on d4. This is why bishop e3 is played. Shirov parts with the bishop, which is common also in this opening, because again, being cramped, having less pieces is helpful sometimes, and also black plans to place his pawns on the white squares anyway, so the light square bishop wouldn't be useful. Queen c7, h4, e6. Again, remember the flexibility here. e6, h5, and d5. So notice that since Shirov has a dark square bishop, he doesn't place his pawns on the dark square. So for instance, he doesn't play e5, for example. Right? It's playable, but he doesn't play it because the bishop would be bad. He plays d5, make sure that his remaining bishop is good. Queen d2, knight d7, b4, knight g f6, h6, and bishop f8. So Polgar takes the space, right? However, Shirov has a very perfect pawn structure. All right, and the question for Polgar is how to break through, how to make any progress in this position. Bishop f4, queen d8. Now bishop d3 here. Another idea is b5 here. And let's say queen a5, rook b3, bishop e7 takes, bishop e2. And the idea is to take over the b file for white. So for example, after these moves right here, very slight advantage for white. Bishop d3 is fine. Bishop e7. Again, I'll just move along here, and we can see that the position again is locked up pretty good, except that black has this break on the a file, makes it. And I've highlighted all of these, made all of these highlights to illustrate the basic plan of black here is to play knight b6 into c4 and dominate that square, and also to capture on b4 and double up the rooks on the a file. Why is it important to put a knight on c4 for black? Well, one of the reasons is that after the move a takes b4, and let's say b takes c takes b4 for instance, the pawn on c6 is backward and vulnerable. So by putting a knight on c4, besides having a great square for the knight, it also protects the c6 pawn inadvertently, so that if the knight is traded on c4, then another pawn will be placed on c4. So black is basically getting his break on the a file, but also not allowing white to be able to attack its weakness. So a3, knight b6, and this is the plan that you're seeing right now. Knight e8, bishop e5, and now knight d6, so both knights are poised to hop in and actually support each other on c4. Bishop g7, knight comes in, rook moves, e5, a takes b4, a takes b4, there it is. Rook comes to the second rank, queen f4, rook d2, attacking the bishop that's hanging, bishop b1, knight e4. And what you're seeing is a great example of the modern defense here. Great example of how it should be played. Queen g4, knight a3 by Shirov, knight f4, knight takes b1, getting rid of that bishop, because all that white has here is sacrificial themes, because you got to remember, white needs to break through that fianchetto position somehow. His bishop on g7 is not really doing anything. So white needs to be able to sacrifice a piece on g6. So for instance, or two pieces rather. So for instance, knight takes g6, any pawn takes g6, f takes g6, h takes g6 for example, then queen takes g6, and now there's some big time threats because the queen is staring the king right in the face. The rooks can move over to the open g file, etc. So Shirov kills that right away by playing knight takes b1. Rook takes b1, knight d3, and takes away all of the sacrificial opportunities here. Rook a1. Now, Polgar, being an aggressive player, decides to pass up on the passive defense of just playing a move like rook hc1, for example, which probably leads to some kind of draw at the end of the day. Right? But it's very passive, and it's not in the style of Polgar. So instead, she opts to play for control. Rook a1, rook takes c3, rook a7. So pawns in exchange for activity. So now both of her rooks are activated. She has the a file, and she's still trying to orchestrate a winning attack here. And even now, she's trying to figure out how she can get her queen to g7. But remember, Shirov has gotten all of these pawns. And the attack either has to work or she can resign. So here, basically, his last ditch effort right here to basically play the move queen f6, queen g7. But Shirov just gives the pawn back as he can because he's captured so much material. At this point, the threat of mate is gone. More trades. And after rook b8, Judith had to resign. So you can see in 2 rounds, rounds 5 and 7 against top level players, the modern has prevailed. But one thing I noticed is that in both situations, there were 2 attacking players, 2 aggressive players who overstepped their boundaries, so to speak. Right? They wanted to press an attack where there was none. And sometimes playing against a modern requires great patience. All right, and players that have more patience, sometimes will be able to deal with these type of positions a little bit better. Although tactical players will sometimes get a quick victory. So you can see that after these 2 wins, how Shirov is motivated to keep bringing out the opening. All right, keep trying it out at high level, and of course, eventually, GMs, when preparing against Alexei Shirov, realize that hey, he might play this opening. Okay, so now after this tournament at Linares, it's no longer a surprise weapon, so to speak. Okay, so the next year at the Dana Memorial in Amsterdam, round 11. Judith Polgar is back again with the white pieces versus Alexei Shirov. Game started off the same way. Modern defense with c6, bishop c4 this time, which stops d5. So d6, queen f3. And again, Polgar, being her aggressive self, goes straight for the straight for the attack immediately. E6, knight ge2, and now b5. Remember, I told you this was one of the options here, and this is what's fantastic about the modern, is the flexibility here. Bishop b3, a5, a3, bishop a6. Again, sometimes this becomes an issue, what to do with this bishop. d5 here, c takes d5, e takes d5, and now e5. And I have this bishop highlighted in yellow because now it shut out the game. Knight e4, queen c7, c4. And you might say, wow, why did Polgar do that? The reason why she did that is to activate the bishop that will shut out the game on b3. After c4, b takes c4, giving up the pawn. Now bishop a4 check. Alright, so now the king has to give up the right to castle or block with the knight. Shirov chooses to block with the knight, d7, knight d7, and now knight to c3. So again, activity compensating for material is the idea here. King e7. Why does Shirov play king e7? Because there's a problem with this pin here, which is hindering black's development. If knight g f6, then black is going to lose immediately to knight takes f6. Right, just lose a piece. Knight e7, same thing. Knight f6, the bishop has to capture, and then queen comes in. This is bad position. So this is why Shirov played king e7, just to take care of that problem immediately. Of course, that wasn't the only solution. Rook b8 was possible, as well as the move h6. But king e7 was played, and here Polgar plays a very nice move, nice idea. I'm sure many of you didn't see it. Knight takes d6 here. Queen d6. If king d6, right away black loses. Knight e4, king e7, and d6. Alright. Queen d6, knight e4. Again, activity for material. Queen d5, bishop g5. And that's basically all that she wrote here. Knight df6, rook d1, queen b7, rook d7. Again, the knight is pinned on f6, queen d7, bishop d7, h6, queen d1. So Shirov resigned in 21 moves. Crushing defeat. So obviously Judith Polgar was ready the next time they played. So he went to the well one time too many, as they would say, and Shirov was absolutely crushed in this game. Not to be deterred, Shirov would play at Belgrade Investment Tournament in 1995. Michael Adams, British #1 at the time with the white pieces. Again, c6. And I've already explained the plans to you, so I'm not going to explain the arrows. That's basically what those are for. Bishop e3, queen b6. Now Adams is known for his positional style. So he's not going to be a wild attacking player like Judith Polgar. There's classical development here, a la Anatoly Karpov. a4, preventing the b5 idea. So castles. Knight d2 and e5. D takes e5, d takes e5, knight c4. Looks pretty safe, right, for black. Looks like a draw. Handshake coming soon. We could go home. Not at all. This is very dangerous position where black has to be careful due to the weakness of the d6 square. And you will see that the whole entire game, or most of the game, revolves around that weakness. So check it out. Have it highlighted there. Rook d8, queen d6, offering an endgame right away. Knight e8, queen takes e7, knight takes e7. There it is. Knight right in the d6. Knight e6. Now bishop c4, threatening to double the pawns on f6. And also, if that knight moves, take on f7. Knight b6, bishop takes e6, and now rook d6. If bishop takes e6, then just simply knight takes b7. The alternative, f takes e6, rook fd1, doubling the pawns and holding on to the control of d6. Therefore, the lesser of evils is just to play rook d6. Bishop goes back to b3 with the idea of playing bishop c5. So this is why Shirov played knight d7. But you can see the problem here. Knight d7 prohibits the bishop on c8 from developing. Remember, I told you this bishop is often a cause of trouble, right? Where to put it, how to get it into the game. And so once again, you see that happening. And of course, with the bishop being stuck there on c8, the rook on a8 is stuck. Also, rook bd1, bishop f8, knight b1. What's the idea? Again, it's all about controlling this d6 square. Knight wants to go a3, c4, d6. So rook takes d1, king g7, and knight a3. So that knight's coming to c4, then the d6. So Shirov makes the decision to give up the bishop here. And now, although white's pawns are damaged, white has the bishop pair and better pieces. Alright? This compensates for the damaged pawn structure. King f8, a5. Okay, again, making it very difficult for black to develop his move his pawns on the queen side. King e7, f4, opening up the position, right, for the bishop pair. And now knight f6. F takes e5, knight takes e4, rook d4, bishop f5, and g4. Okay, so now the bishop is attacked. The bishop really can't move because the knight would would be hanging on e4, c5, and then rook c4. And in 29 moves, Shirov had to resign. All right, so just from taking that pawn right there, he lost the game. So you can see it wasn't a big tactical melee. It was a positional play in the endgame, all revolving around this d6 square. So Shirov took another loss in 95. Again, grandmasters are, preparing for him at this time. They played again in Dos Hermanos, round 7, 1995. You see the same opening, except with this time Adams playing a little more aggressive with the ideas of castle and queen side. And then you see this early b5 advance. Again, flexibility is the key here. Piece play dominates, so therefore Adams doesn't even try to stop Shirov from playing, bishop to g4. Bishop takes g7, king takes g7, e5. D takes, knight fd7. Queen comes to e3, supporting this pawn. e6. Bishop takes e6 and knight g5. Queen comes to e5 and knight takes e6. F takes e6. a4. Queen takes e3. F takes e3. b4, knight e4. And again, you see another endgame from Michael Adams. Again, his style is that of a quiet positional play. He has that style of, say, like Vladimir Kramnik, right? Anatoly Karpov. Just get a better pawn structure, better pieces, and just slowly grind you down. And I won't make too many comments on this game. But Michael Adams defeated Shirov. Okay, so we're gonna leave it there as the game went on for another 30 moves, where Shirov wound up losing this end game due to the immense pawn weaknesses in the position. In Linares again in 1995, though, Shirov was able to secure a draw against Grandmaster Sergei Tivyakov. who was ranked 26, 25. And for those of you who don't know, Sergei Tivyakov is a specialist in the Scandinavian defense from the black side, specifically the variation Queen D6. Here he plays the white pieces, plays a similar variation to Michael Adams, but this time Shirov is able to draw the game. I guess though the point that I'm making here is that the grandmasters by this time had figured out that what Shirov wanted to do and had prepared tremendously for this opening. Michael Adams again played Shirov. This time it's in Dortmund in 1996. And this time Shirov was able to hold the draw. Again, they're going to end game. White is slightly better. And Shirov was able to draw this game. This game was against Peter Leko. Leko had the white pieces and Shirov, again, the black pieces. And this game took place, again, 1996. And again, I'm going kind of fast. And this is basically Shirov's last hurrah during this time period in the opening, as he was able to go on and win this game. At the time, as Peter Leko, not having the experience, and eventually was outplayed in this ending with the two rooks versus the rook and the bishop, and eventually he could not stop this pawn right here on A2 without losing material. Again, 1996, this is versus Anand with the white pieces. Remember, bishop c4 is the idea of hindering d5. b5. And Anand is at his peak at this moment, 96. Remember, he had just played for the World Chess Championship in 95. And he hasn't even bothered castling here. And he just pretty much just puts a lot of pressure on Shirov's position. And eventually will go on to win this game also. Again, like I said, I'm not gonna get into a lot of analysis. Maybe I'll, at certain point go over these games individually and go into my, typical deep analysis, showing variations and really explaining what's going on in the game. But I just wanted you guys to see the evolution of Shirov's modern defense from 1994 or 1993 rather to 1996. How at first he was able to score these spectacular wins, and then as grandmasters, put in their memory banks that, hey, this guy might play the modern, that they all began to prepare for it, and you saw more and more defeats. And this is the final game I'll show real quick. This is Miguel Ilescas, Spanish grandmaster, with the white pieces. And of course he was a good grandmaster, but he was not Alexei Shirov. He wasn't on that level, but he too was ready for this opening. C6 and D5 was played here. And this is a good response also. It's just playing this three pawns attack. And I think this is considered like a form of Caro-Kann, but opening is not important, I guess, unless you want to look it up. So E5 is played, knight H6. Again, the bishop is gone. You see there's this wedge in the position. And now this just shows you how bad the position is already for black. That black plays this move queen d4 and just gives up the knight immediately. Right out of the opening without enough compensation in the position. And this is just like a brutal attack that takes place. Miguel Leskis is a great technician, great tactical player, great attacking player. Love watching his games. And again, I'm just going through quickly. Of course, Shirov tries to fight, but his king is exposed. There's no way that he's going to be able to withstand the onslaught that's coming. Okay. So that is it for today's video. I hope it wasn't too long. I just wanted to show you Shirov's foray into the modern defense with this variation c6. I found it very interesting myself to see the the progress from the first games when he first came out with the opening in '94 to when grandmasters had put a little bit more work into preparing against it, and seeing how how he did, in contrast to the early days. So that was interesting, and I hope you found it interesting also. And that goes to show you that that's the reason why certain openings you don't see them at top level. Again, they're great surprise weapons. You can bring out these openings, at the top level. You'll see the modern every now and then, things like that. But a player can't make a living on it and play consistently because the positions are just too difficult. Like after proper preparation, the positions are just too difficult. Right? You're not lost, but you're in positions where you have no prospect. You're just on the defensive. You're barely holding on and able to draw, and you're just gonna drop too many games like that. You're gonna get crushed, and so these openings are more relegated to the shelf and are used occasionally for surprise weapons. And you see here what happened when the player kind of tries to introduce a risky opening like this into the repertoire. It's kind of like if you try to introduce the Alban counter gambit in your repertoire and play it all the time. Like, yeah, you might get some wins at first because you'll be surprising people, but once they go to the databases and start looking and finding out, okay, this is what I need to do against this is when you'll be in trouble. And this is why chess always reverts back to those tried and true openings like the Ruy Lopez and Queen's Gambit. I know it sounds boring, but it is what it is, and you'll see the Nimzo Indian defenses and things like that, because it doesn't really matter how much preparation is done. There's never going to be a situation where you just get blown out of the water playing Nimzo Indian defense or playing the Ruy Lopez. Yeah, of course you can lose games, but it's not going to be where the opening is unplayable if someone prepares properly. So that's what it seems like sometimes in the case of some of these more obscure openings, that if a top player prepares properly, right, that's a little tongue twister, right? A top player prepares properly, then the opening seems that it would almost be unplayable. Luckily for us, we can play anything we want below 2400. It doesn't even matter. Okay. So anyway, I hope you liked that video. Remember, join me on chess.com, Lee Chess, Instagram, and Twitter, and check the links below and consider supporting the channel. And let me know what you think in the comments below, or give me some suggestions that you might have for a video in the future. And I'll see you guys later.